Welcome to Silent Pages, where every mystery leaves behind a whisper, and every whisper becomes a story. If this tale sent chills down your spine, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that hide in the dark corners of forgotten towns, vanished lives, and secrets never meant to resurface. Subscribe Nin 2013. A family vanished without a trace during a winter storm in rural Oregon. No bodies, no footprints, just a scorched farmhouse and a name carved into the stone. Years before she was even born. But 6 years later, their daughter's voice returned through a dead radio on a forgotten frequency, and with it, something else came back to dot something that remembers you, something that wears your face, dot. The first time anyone heard the radio signal was 6 years after the house burned down. It came through a shortwave band, garbled, faint, and full of static, but beneath the distortion, the voice was unmistakable. If you find this, we're still here. The local dispatcher in Fairbridge, Oregon, thought it was a prank at first. The transmission came through on an outdated emergency frequency, one that hadn't been used since the early 2000s. But the voice matched a missing person file that hadn't been opened in a decade. A girl, 15 when she vanished. Her name was Amy Harper. She and her family, Father Scott, Mother Elaine, little brother Noah, had gone missing during a winter storm in 2013. Their farmhouse caught fire, responders said. The structure collapsed before the snowplows could even reach the ridge road. All that remained was scorched beams and a shattered chimney. No bodies were ever recovered. For most in Fairbridge, the Harpers became local law, a family swallowed by the storm. But to Sheriff Marcus Dwyer, it was the one case that refused to settle. He'd been the first on scene back then, and what he saw in the ashes had never stopped bothering him. There was no blood, no remains, no evidence they'd ever been inside when the fire started. Now, in the middle of a quiet July afternoon in 2019, Amy Harper's voice was back. He played the tape 8 times in a row before calling anyone. Not the feds, not state police, just one person, the only one who might believe him. Casey Nolan had grown up next to the Harpers. She was 17 when they vanished. Now 23, she lived 2 hours north in Portland, where she worked as a junior sound technician for a local podcast studio. She hadn't been back to Fairbridge in 5 years. She answered on the 3rd ring. Casey, it's Sheriff Dwyer. I need you to come home. He didn't explain over the phone. She wouldn't have believed him if he had. But by nightfall, Casey was standing in the sheriff's office, staring down at the old reel-to-reel recorder. Dwyer didn't speak. He just pressed play. A burst of static filled the room. Then a soft, stammered voice cut through, female, young, and unmistakably scared. If you find this, we're still here. Casey's breath caught. She stepped back from the speaker like it had bitten her. That's not real. Dwyer watched her, his expression unreadable. Tell me that's not Amy's voice. Casey didn't answer. The next morning, the two of them drove up Ridgeway Road, past the frost line markers, up into the thickets of pine where the air stayed cold even in summer. The Harper property had been declared unstable after the fire. No one had touched it since. The place looked like a skeleton, foundation crumbling, stonework blackened with soot, ash still nestled in the hollows between roots. And yet the mailbox still stood, rusted, dented, and crooked, but upright. Someone had tried to paint over the name, but through the layers of white, the letters still showed. Harper Casey stood beside the mailbox, arms folded tight, while Sheriff Dwyer lifted a panel on the back of his SUV and pulled out a portable radio scanner, analog, built in the late 80s, the same model that used to sit in the Harper kitchen. "We're going to do this right," he said. "No wires, no cell interference, old school." He set the dial to the same band he'd caught the transmission on. Static, a low hum, the sound of wind, then a burst. "We're still here." Casey dropped the thermos she was holding. It rolled down the gravel slope and hit the front tire of the SUV. She turned to the sheriff. "How is that possible?" Dwyer was already scanning the tree line. "That's what we're going to find out." What they didn't know yet, what nobody knew, was that the fire in 2013 hadn't been an accident. That the house hadn't collapsed under snow and flame, but had been buried deliberately. To hide something. To trap something. 3 days. After the radio signal was first recorded, another came through. A longer message. Same voice. Same terrified tone. "He's still here. He never left. Please. The basement." Then silence. There was no basement in the Harper house, at least. Not one anyone had ever documented. Sheriff Dwyer pulled the original property plans the same day. The files were archived in a metal cabinet at City Hall, drawn up in 1946 by the county's only land surveyor at the time. It was a one-level farmhouse, no cellar, no substructures, just a crawl space under the kitchen. But something didn't line up. The chimney had no clean-out, no visible access point from the ground level, and the eastern wall, the one facing the ravine, was thick with earth even before the fire. It would have been the perfect place to conceal a second level. Dwyer didn't sleep that night. Neither did Casey. At 5:17 the next morning, they broke into the ruins of the Harper house. The roof was long gone. Floor joists split and curled upward like broken ribs, but under the blackened beams and cracked stone tiles, they found it, a hatch, barely visible beneath a warped section of flooring. It was iron-plated and bolted with a locking bar welded from the inside. Dwyer dropped to his knees, brushed away the debris, and ran his gloved fingers along the edge. "Jesus," he muttered. "They were down there." He turned to Casey. "Call Portland. Get someone you trust. Someone who can test analog signal trace. We're going to need confirmation." Casey didn't argue. She knew just who to call. 2 days later, a man named Travis Chen arrived, late 20s, wiry, sarcastic, and brilliant with audio forensics. He set up his gear behind the SUV, far enough from the ruins not to interfere with the field. The signal was still faint, but clearer now. It repeated every 90 minutes, like a loop. Only this time, it carried something new. A second voice, male. "Younger. Don't listen to him. He's not our father. He wears his face." Casey stared at the waveform as it rendered across Travis's laptop. She whispered, "That's Noah." Dwyer looked between them. "Are you saying something's still broadcasting from inside that house?" Travis nodded. "And not from a tape. This is live modulation. It's analog, but adaptive, like someone's boosting the signal whenever it gets weak." "Boosting how?" Travis turned to the ruins, eyes narrowing. "That's what I'm going to find out." They opened the hatch that night. It took 3 hours with a blowtorch and crowbar, and when it finally cracked, the smell that rose from the darkness was thick with mildew, rust, and something older. Dwyer led the way down, flashlight in hand. He descended the stone steps one at a time, breathing through a cloth mask. Casey followed. Travis stayed topside, recording. The basement wasn't wide, maybe 15 feet across, but it ran deep, deeper than it should have. The walls weren't poured concrete, they were carved into bedrock, as if someone had hollowed the space out by hand. At the far end stood a metal table. On it, a radio, analog, two-band, flickering, and beside it, a photograph. Casey picked it up. It was Amy, taken in profile, her hair longer, her face older, but unmistakably her. She was still alive when this was taken, and the camera was modern, digital, less than 5 years old. Something clicked behind them, a soft electric whir. Dwyer spun, light scanning the room. "Did you hear that?" Before Casey could respond, the radio screeched. Static, then a voice, low, flat. "You're too late." Then silence, and then the light bulb above them flickered on. "It wasn't connected to any wires," Casey whispered. "Someone's still down here." Dwyer raised his weapon, swept the far wall. But there was no door, no tunnel, no exit. And then they saw it, carved into the stone, a set of names. Elaine Harper, 1968 to 2013, Scott Harper. 1966 to 2013, Amy Harper. 1998, Noah Harper. 2004, Casey Nolan. 1996, the last name was freshly etched. The flashlight slipped in Dwyer's grip. He turned to Casey, face pale. "We need to go now." They scrambled up the steps, the hatch still open, the forest around them silent, but something had changed. The signal stopped transmitting that night. The next morning, Travis's laptop was fried. His drives melted from the inside. The waveform data gone. Only one file remained. It was a video, 22 seconds. Black and white, static overlay. It showed Casey and Dwyer descending into the basement. Only it was filmed from inside, from the corner of the room. The camera had been watching them before they even knew it existed. Casey didn't speak for a long time. When she did, her voice was quiet. "Someone's down there." And then, softer, "He knew we were coming." The rain came fast that morning. No thunder, just the steady hiss of water rolling through the pines like a warning. Travis stood on the ridge above the Harper ruins, both hands shoved into his jacket pockets, watching steam rise from the scorched earth where the hatch had been unearthed. Casey sat inside the SUV, engine off, window cracked. She hadn't spoken since they found her name carved into the basement wall. Not even when Dwyer had tried to explain it away. Vandalism, coincidence, maybe even an old prank etched before the fire. But none of it made sense. The etching was clean, no soot in the grooves. It hadn't been there before. And worse, the video they'd found, the 22-second clip, had been filmed from inside that same room, facing the stairwell. Someone knew they were coming. Sheriff Dwyer double-checked the locks on his cruiser for the 3rd time that morning. He wasn't just rattled, he was afraid. It was in his eyes. Not the kind of fear that grabs you in the moment, but the deep, Merrill-level dread that comes when you realize a puzzle piece doesn't just not fit. It was never meant to dot by 10:12 a.m. The signal came back. No warning, no build-up, just a sharp chirp across Travis's repaired receiver, followed by a single voice, female again, urgent, closer than before. "He's watching. He knows you opened it. Don't come back." Then silence. No repeat, no loop. Just the one message. Casey stared at the receiver. That wasn't Amy. Dwyer frowned. "You sure?" She was younger and scared. This one was different. Older. Controlled, she paused, almost like she was trying not to panic. Travis didn't look up from his scope. If someone's transmitting from inside that pit, they're doing it with equipment we didn't see. Dwyer nodded. Could be more chambers. Hidden rooms. Or someone closed them after we left, Casey said quietly. The sheriff met her eyes. We were only down there for 6 minutes. You think someone was already inside? I think they never left. They didn't go back down that day. The hatch had shifted slightly overnight, warped by damp air and earth pressure. Travis set up motion sensors and a passive receiver at the entrance, linked through a battery array and isolated. SIGNAL net. It was cutting-edge equipment, expensive and borderline illegal for private use. But if anything moved, breathed, or transmitted from within 50 feet of that hatch, they'd know. That night, Casey stayed at the sheriff's guest house. Travis returned to his motel in town. Dwyer stayed up, monitoring the feed. At 3:14 a.m., every sensor tripped. He jumped out of his chair so fast he knocked the coffee across the desk. The motion alert showed a humanoid figure, 5-foot range, female profile, standing at the edge of the hatch. Just standing, not opening it, not moving. And then, 12 seconds later, the shape dropped out of frame. Gone, not walked away. Not crawled back down, just disappeared. He replayed it 3 times, called Travis. Called Casey by 3:37. They were all back at the site. The sensors had reset themselves. The battery had drained by 87%. The receiver was still warm, and on the iron plate of the hatch, someone had scratched a symbol into the surface. A circle intersected by a cross, ancient, ritualistic, burned into the metal with something like acid. Casey stared at it, whispering, "What the hell is that?" Travis didn't answer, but his face went pale. He pulled out his phone, flipped through images, and stopped on one. It was an old forestry file from 1972, scanned into the Federal Wildlife Archives. A missing hiker from the same region disappeared during a controlled burn. Her last known location was logged on a map with a red mark. The symbol next to it was the same. Travis looked up. This wasn't the first signal from Ridgeway Road. Dwyer raised a brow. Meaning, he flipped his phone around. Meaning, the Harpers weren't the first ones to disappear up here. They're just the first ones anyone noticed. 3 days later, Casey dug deeper into her father's old notebooks. Her dad, Harold Nolan, had been a quiet man, Vietnam vet, electrician, a fixer of things. He passed in 2016, never talking much about the Harpers or what happened that winter, but his journals were obsessive, page after page about the Ridgeway blackout zone. Electromagnetic drift, dead bands in the forest where compasses spun and radios cut out. There were drawings, too, diagrams of something underground, always circular, always with that same intersecting cross. In one entry from October 2012, 2 months before the fire, he wrote, "Scott Harper came by again, says the voices are back. From the walls this time. I told him not to dig. The land doesn't want to be disturbed. Elaine thinks he's losing it, but I don't. There's something under that house, something that pretends." Casey's hands trembled as she read it. This wasn't random. This had been happening before the fire. She called Dwyer, my dad, knew. The sheriff met her an hour later. They went through the journals together. In the final entry, written 2 days before Harold died, he had scrawled a single sentence across the entire page. "If you hear the static, walk away. If you hear your name, Run. Dwyer leaned back in the chair, eyes scanning the walls like something might be watching. What the hell were they hearing out here? That night, Casey had the dream again. Same corridor, same flickering lights. She walked barefoot through the basement. Only this time the walls whispered. Not words, voices. Hundreds of them. All layered over each other like a hive of pleading, screaming echoes. And then, ahead, a figure, small, curled into the corner, rocking. Amy. But when Casey called her name, the figure didn't look up. Instead, the voice came from behind her. Not Amy's, her own. The next morning, the hatch was open, wide, and the inside of the door, the one they'd left clean, now had something painted across it in blood-red letters. Come and see. Travis refused to go back down. He said he was out. Done. He packed his equipment and left for Portland by noon. He didn't make it. That night, his car was found 30 miles east, abandoned on a logging road. No sign of Travis, no footprints, just the car, door open, keys in the ignition, and inside the glove box, folded in half, was one of Harold Nolan's journal pages, the one with the circle and cross. Casey didn't sleep. She sat up watching old home videos of the Harpers, ones they'd filmed during winter cookouts, 4th of July barbecues, school concerts. There was Amy dancing in the yard with sparklers, Noah chasing a football barefoot, Scott Harper at the grill, his laugh booming, normal, happy, human. But then, at the end of one tape, there was a strange segment, unlabeled, shaky, like someone had picked up the camera without knowing how to use it. It was filmed in the Harper basement, pre-fire. Amy was standing against the wall, eyes wide, face slack. Behind her the shadows moved, not like smoke, like arms. A voice, not Amy's, whispered from off-camera. Say it. She didn't speak, just shook her head. Say it. Amy looked into the camera, tears in her eyes. Then the tape cut to black. When Casey paused, the footage, the frame froze on a still. She zoomed in on the wall behind Amy. There, carved faintly into the stone, was another name. Travis Chen. He hadn't even met the Harpers back then, but his name had been there before the fire, before he vanished. Casey called Dwyer, voice shaking. It's marking us, one by one. He didn't argue, because in the station locker room that morning, someone had scratched something into the mirror. Marcus, Dwyer. It wasn't there the night before, and it hadn't been done with a knife. It was etched from behind the glass. Sheriff Dwyer took down the mirror, smashed it, and left the station unlocked for the first time in 30 years. He didn't go home. He went back up Ridgeway Road, alone, and as the sun dipped behind the mountains, he descended the hatch without telling anyone. Casey waited for his call. It never came. At 2:43 a.m., the signal returned. This time, it was his voice, whispering, bleeding through the static, like something crushed his chest with every breath. Don't trust her. She's not who she thinks she is. Then a long, hollow hiss, and another voice layered beneath it, Amy's, only this time she was laughing. The laughter didn't end with the broadcast. It looped, a low, static-wrapped giggle that cycled every 45 seconds, just faint enough to make Casey question if it was even real. She sat on the edge of her childhood bed, back in her father's old house, the receiver pressed to her ear. The glow from the scanner screen bathed the room in a sickly green light. She hadn't moved in hours. At 3:13 a.m., the sound stopped. No static, no voices, just the soft whir of the tape inside the old Rialto reel she'd connected for backup. She hit rewind, played it again. Same message, same laugh. Don't trust her. She's not who she thinks she is. Casey replayed that part 10 times. It was Sheriff Dwyer's voice, without a doubt, raspy, weak, but him. He'd gone into that basement alone and hadn't come back. This was the first anyone had heard from him since, and now he was warning her. She looked across the room, toward the mirror above her father's old desk. The edges were foggy with age, the reflection pale, untrustworthy. She studied her face, tried to find anything wrong, anything off, but it was just her, wasn't it? By morning, the signal was gone again. She called the station. Still no sign of Dwyer. His cruiser had been found a mile down from the Harper ruins, parked neatly on the shoulder of Ridgeway Road. Driver's side window down, keys in the seat. No prints, no signs of struggle, and no blood. Just one item on the passenger seat, a photograph. It was taken from the same vantage point as the old home video, the one showing Amy in the basement. Only this time, the figure wasn't Amy. It was Casey. She was standing against the same wall. Same pose. Same slack face, same shadows behind her. But she'd never been photographed down there. Not that she could. Remember, she drove to the station by noon and stood in front of the evidence board Dwyer had kept locked in his office. Most of it was old casework, petty thefts, local disputes, deer poaching. But the bottom left corner held the Harper file. 3 manila folders, charred, partially melted at the edges, and behind them, tacked loosely to the corkboard, was a map. Not a road map, a topographical grid. The Harper property sat dead center, but the map covered more than just their land. It stretched into the national forest, out toward abandoned mining tunnels and forgotten ranger trails. Dwyer had marked 6 points, red XS dot, all with dates next to them, 197 to 1981, 1993, 2004, 2013, 2019. Casey touched the latest mark. It was labeled CN, her initials. She yanked the map off the board and laid it across the desk. She stared at the lines, the terrain, the elevation markings. Then it hit her. Every X sat at the mouth of a geological depression, shallow craters formed from old lava, tubes, or collapsed cave systems. She flipped through her father's journals again, looking for anything that matched page 117. The wells go down, but not forever. Not into earth, not into stone. They fall into him. Another entry, page 132. She calls from the deep when the ground is coldest. The voice wears 1,000 faces. You'll know it by the smile. It always smiles wrong. That night, Casey returned to the Harper ruins alone. She didn't tell anyone, didn't leave a note, just packed her gear, grabbed a flashlight, and hiked the slope with a printed copy of the grid in her pocket. The hatch was still open. A faint breeze rose from the darkness, colder than it should have been in July. She clicked on her light, stepped down one rung at a time, her boots echoing on the stone. The radio table was still there, but the radio was gone. In its place was a notebook. Dwyer's handwriting, pages filled with jagged ink strokes, as if his hand had been shaking with every line. She's not a ghost. She's not a memory. She learns. I asked her where they are. She smiled. She wears Amy's voice now, wears Noah's scream. She only needs one more name. And then, scribbled in red ink, across the last page, If you hear yourself speak, run. The basement light flickered. Casey froze. Something moved in the far corner. Not big, not fast, just present. She backed toward the stairs, flashlight trembling, and then the voice came. From behind her, faint, ragged, Casey. She turned. The stairwell was empty, but the voice had come from the top of the hatch. She climbed quickly, boots slipping on the metal rungs, heart pounding. When she reached the surface, no one was there, but the trees were swaying like something massive had just moved through them. She ran to the SUV, slammed the door, locked it. The scanner crackled, just static at first, then her own voice, breathy, shaky, confused. Who's in the house? Hello? Is someone there? It was her. But from 6 years ago, she recognized the tape. That was the night before the fire. She'd been at the Harper's place, babysitting, while Scott and Elaine went into town. Amy had gone upstairs. Noah was asleep, and something had moved in the walls. She'd whispered into her phone recorder as a joke, saved the clip, played it for Amy the next day. But that file was never uploaded, never shared, just deleted. And now, it was broadcasting on a signal no one should be able to access. She tried to breathe, tried to think, but then the voice changed again, deeper now, broken, like something wearing her vocal cords as a mask. Let me in. She threw the scanner into the back seat and drove down the slope without stopping. Tires slipped on gravel. Pine needles scraped the windshield. She didn't care by the time she reached town. It was nearly midnight, and something had followed her. Lights flickered on Main Street as she passed. Street lamps dimmed. Cameras in storefronts turned to static. Dogs howled back at her house. The porch light was off. She never turned it off. She entered cautiously, keys gripped like a weapon. Everything was exactly as she left it, except the mirror. The fog had cleared, and now there were two reflections, one of her standing still and one slightly behind, smiling. She spun nothing. She turned back to the glass. Now just one reflection again, but the smile lingered in her memory. She didn't sleep that night. She replayed Dwyer's final message again and again. She's not who she thinks she is. Casey opened a fresh page in her notebook, wrote a single sentence. What if I'm already marked? At 4:32 a.m., a knock came at the front door. 3 soft taps. She didn't move. Then the doorknob turned. She grabbed her father's revolver from the side drawer, cocked it, aimed it at the entrance. Who's there? Silence. Then a soft whisper from behind the door. Amy. Casey's grip loosened. Her voice cracked. Amy. But Amy was gone. Gone for 6 years. She stepped closer. The doorknob turned again. Click, click, click. The lights dimmed. The mirror cracked, and a voice whispered, not from outside, but from inside the room. Let me wear you. She fired. Once. Twice the door exploded inward from the force. But no one was there. Just a single CASSET resting on the porch. Labeled in neat handwriting, Fairbridge Christmas, 2013. She picked it up with shaking hands, played it in her father's old deck. Laughter, music, children playing. Then a voice, Amy's, again. I didn't burn. I opened the door. He said we'd be a family forever. Then silence. Then the same laughter that had haunted the loop. Only this time it was joined by a second voice, Casey's, laughing right alongside her. Casey didn't remember recording the laughter, but it was hers. Undeniably, that sharp inhale before the exhale, the slight rasp on her upper register. It was exactly how she laughed when she was nervous, except in this recording, she didn't sound nervous. She sounded thrilled. She played the cassette again, slower this time, rewinding, listening, analyzing every breath. In the background, snow crunching, bells, a child's voice, Noah, maybe yelling faster, faster, like he was on a sled. Then a thump, then Amy giggling. Then Casey's voice again, only she had no memory of being with the Harpers that Christmas. She was in California with her aunt that year. She still had photos, plane tickets, receipts. Proof. But this tape was also proof. So which was real? She reached for her father's notebook again. Page 142. One of the last coherent entries before his handwriting spiraled into chaos. It doesn't kill you. It replaces you. One laugh at a time. Her hand trembled as she closed the journal. Outside, the wind had changed. A dry, whispering kind of wind, the kind that didn't belong in Oregon's July nights. It pushed through the trees like something brushing against them from above, not around. She checked every lock in the house, pulled the blinds, turned off every light, and sat in the middle of the living room with a flashlight and her father's revolver in her lap. She kept the scanner on, but low, just enough to hear a transmission if it bled through again. By 3:11 a.m. the loop returned. Not audio this time. Video. Her laptop, which she hadn't touched in over a day, turned on by itself. Media file opened from an unknown folder. It was security footage, grainy, black and white. A time stamp in the corner, the 24th of December 2013. 1 hour, 43 minutes and 9 seconds. Inside the frame, the Harper basement, before the fire. Amy sat on the floor, whispering to someone just out of view. Then, slowly, she turned toward the camera and spoke a single sentence. "He likes you best, Casey." Then the feed cut. The laptop shut off. Smoke curled from the USB port. She backed away from the table, pulse roaring in her ears. The mirror across the room fogged up again. She hadn't breathed on it. The room was cold. Still, moisture spread across the glass in a slow, deliberate pattern. Then a shape began to form. Letters, a single word. Tonight. She ran, didn't bother with shoes or keys. Just grabbed her flashlight and sprinted out the back door into the tree line. The town slept below, unaware, oblivious. She knew they wouldn't believe her if she tried to explain. Not the radio signals, not the hatch, not the video of her laughing next to a girl who'd supposedly died in a house fire. She needed answers. Real ones. She needed to go back. This time, deeper than before. She didn't take the road. She hiked the old way, the trail her father used to take her on when she was little, the one that ran along the creek and curved behind the Harper land. Over the years, branches had claimed it. Roots split through the path like veins. But she knew the turns. She knew the sounds. She was halfway there when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, nothing. She kept walking. Then the footsteps came again. Not behind now. Beside. She raised the flashlight. The beam caught a figure. Just ahead, maybe 10 feet, standing at the tree line tall. Still shadowed, she whispered, "Sheriff." The figure didn't move, didn't flinch, just stared. She took a step forward. Dwyer. The flashlight flickered. The beam collapsed in the split second of darkness. Something moved, fast. When the light came back on, the figure was gone, but a voice whispered behind her ear, "Wrong." Name. She ran the rest of the way. By the time she reached the Harper ruins, dawn had begun to rise. Pale light washed over the ash, revealing familiar landmarks, the mailbox, now leaning farther, the cracked stone arch near what had once been the front porch, and the hatch, still open. She descended again, faster this time. Each rung creaked with memory. The air was heavier than before, like walking into a cave that exhaled its own breath. The basement looked the same, but the photograph was gone. The notebook too, only the table remained, and something new beside it. A phone, old, corded, yellowed, from age. Not plugged into anything, but it rang once, then silence. She didn't want to answer, but she did. Her hand shook as she raised the receiver to her ear. Hello. A long pause. Then, I made you, from her. It wasn't a voice she recognized, but it knew her. You were the easiest, it continued, so eager to be needed, to fix what was broken. But the Harpers weren't broken, Casey. They were opened. She couldn't speak, could barely breathe. You came back, it said, softer now. That means you're ready. Ready for what? She whispered. To remember. The line went dead. The flashlight dimmed again, and this time it didn't recover. Darkness swallowed the room then. One by one, candles lit themselves along the stone walls. No flame, just glow, revealing new carvings. Names, dozens of them, all scratched into the rock, some with full birth and death dates, some only beginnings. One read, Marcus Dwyer, 1965. The dash lingered like a half-dug grave, and below it, observed. Then another name, Harold Nolan, her father, his date also unfinished, and beneath his name, in a different hand, barely etched, he broke the mirror. Then another dot, her own, Casey Nolan, 1996. Preparing, she backed away, tripped over the phone. Cord landed hard on her hip. When she opened her eyes again, she wasn't in the basement. She was in the Harper kitchen. Pre-fire, everything perfect, clean, warm. Elaine stood at the stove, stirring something. Scott sat at the table, reading a paper. Amy and Noah giggled from the living room. Casey stepped forward. No one noticed her. She touched the countertop, real solid. Elaine turned, walked past her, humming softly. Her eyes were black, not like makeup. Not pupil dilation, solid. Mirror-black. Then she spoke, but not in Elaine's voice. You're early. Casey stepped back. No, she whispered. This isn't real. It was never real. The thing wearing Elaine said. This is where you started? The room shook. Glass shattered somewhere behind her. A door slammed. Then another voice. Amy single quotes is closer. She doesn't remember yet. Then Noah's. She will. Then Scott's voice, only wrong. Too low. Like stone dragging over metal. When the mirrors break. Casey screamed. The kitchen dissolved into ash dot. She was back in the basement, flat on her back. Covered in soot, the candles were out. The flashlight was cold, but something had been left. Next to her, a new photo, taken from above. It showed her curled on the floor, just as she was now, only behind her. In the shadows, another figure crouched, watching, smiling, and its face was a perfect mirror of her own. She didn't remember climbing out of the basement. One moment she was on the floor with that photograph in her hand, staring at the figure behind her, her mirror, and the next. She was stumbling through the Harper ruins, under the harsh grey light of morning, soot on her palms. Blood dried beneath her nose. The hatch was closed again, and she hadn't shut it. Her SUV was gone in its place. A different car idled beside the road, an older model Crown Vic. Its paint flaking, its driver window cracked just enough for smoke to curl out. A man stepped out, tall, grey hair, dressed in an unmarked jacket. He flicked his cigarette into the gravel and looked at her like he'd been waiting a very long time. "You're Harold's daughter," he said. Casey didn't answer. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a badge. Not police, not sheriff. Something older, leather-bound, the symbol nearly worn off. "Name's Finch," he said. "I knew your father." She blinked. "What do you mean you knew him?" "We were part of a team," Finch said. Late 80s, tasked with investigating EM drift zones, missing person clusters, federal work, but off the books. A few years later, your dad left. Said the Ridgeway site was waking up. Said it marked him. He walked past her and stared down at the hatch. "I told them not to bury it," he muttered. "Told them it would come back hungry." Casey stepped forward, her voice raw. "What is it?" Finch didn't answer right away. He touched the rim of the hatch, closed his eyes, then spoke. "It's not a ghost, not a demon, not in any way we understand. It's an observer, a mimic. It doesn't haunt. It studies, learns, and then ... it replaces." Casey shook her head. "Why me?" "Because your name was spoken." He reached into his coat, pulled out a photograph. It was Amy Harper, taken some time after the fire. Her hair longer, skin pale, eyes empty. Behind her, barely visible in the shadows, was the same symbol that had been etched into the hatch, the circle and cross. "She's not alive," Finch said. "Not in the way you're thinking. What's down there uses the pieces it collects. Faces, voices, memories. Amy's just the skin it wears to draw you in." Casey's voice dropped. "Then why the messages? Why the tapes?" Finch looked at her. "Because you're the next vessel." That afternoon, they drove to an address Finch had scribbled on the back of a cigarette pack. A storage unit just outside of town, locked behind a rusted gate. Inside were boxes, dozens of them, filled with tapes, journals, signal maps, and photos dating back to 1905. For every box had the same marker: Ridgeway, entity, do not isolate. Finch explained that the first known case was in West Virginia, near a collapsed mine. Miners reported hearing their wives' voices from inside the earth. A rescue attempt found no bodies, just scorched stone and handprints fused into the wall. In the 70s, hikers vanished in Yosemite. A week later, their voices were heard through AM radio stations 4 states away. Then came the Harpers. Then came Casey. She flipped through a file labeled behavior patterns. At the top, mimic cycle. Below it, observation phase, signal loop, initiation name, etching audio familiarity, implant, mirror phase replacement. She was on step 5. She whispered, "How do I stop it?" Finch didn't answer. He just handed her a key. To what? He lit another cigarette. To the last place it hasn't rewritten yet. Casey followed the map Finch gave her up through an old ranger path east of Ridgeway. The trail wasn't on any GPS, an overgrown slope barely walkable, leading to what looked like an old bunker built into the hillside. The door was iron. No lock, just a crank mechanism. Inside, dust, rotted maps, and a single chair in front of a bank of monitors. All dark until she stepped inside. Then, one by one, the screens flickered on, and every screen showed her sleeping, walking, sitting in her house. Entering the Harper ruins, dozens of angles, dozens of her. She turned slowly in the corner of the bunker. A mirror leaned against the wall, the same fog rolled across it, then a smile, then her reflection blinked. When she hadn't, she raised her hand. The reflection did not. Instead, it whispered something she couldn't hear. Casey stepped back. Finch's voice buzzed from a portable receiver on the table. Casey, if it's begun the mirror phase, it means it's ready. Don't let it speak to you. Don't let it finish the sentence. The mirror fogged again, then cleared. 2 words, I remember. And her reflection smiled wider. She left the bunker, drove back to her father's house. But the house wasn't the same. The porch light flickered in a rhythm. 3 blinks, pause, 2 blinks, pause, 1 blink. Morse code, run. Inside, the air was heavy. Not warm, not cold. Just full. Every photo on the wall had changed. Where once there were family snapshots, her graduation, her father's medals, her first dog, now there were duplicates, same framing, same backgrounds. But in each one, her face was slightly different, tilted wrong, smiling when she hadn't. In one, her eyes were entirely black. She turned on her heel, heart pounding, and ran into her father's workshop behind the house. The old film projector sat where he'd left it. She found a reel labeled Nolan Cabin -2006 and played it on screen. A younger Casey, age 10, building a snowman. Then her father appeared, wrapping a scarf around her. Only the girl didn't look like her. Not completely. Too still. Too symmetrical. Her father looked directly into the camera and said, I know this isn't her, but it's better than the silence. The reel ended, and outside the workshop, something knocked twice on the wall. She raised the revolver. The knocking moved to the opposite wall, then to the ceiling, then inside her head. A rhythm, her heartbeat, but reversed. Then a voice inside her ear, not spoken aloud, but injected. Let me finish you. She screamed, fired into the ceiling, into the walls, into nothing. The knocking stopped. Her ears rang. She fell to her knees, in the silence. A music box began to play. Faint, old, off-key, coming from the crawlspace, beneath the house. She didn't want to open it, but she did, crawling on her belly. Past cobwebs and dust, to the back wall. There, in the dirt, was the box. Playing itself. She opened it. Inside, a cassette and a tooth. Human. She dropped it, ran. By the time she reached town, the sheriff's station was empty. No one answered the phones. No. Cars on the road, lights flickered in the shops. But no people, like the whole town, had exhaled and vanished in the center of the main street. A mirror leaned against a lamppost, the same one. Her reflection waved, and behind it, the Harper family stood, smiling. Amy, Noah, Scott, Elaine, and herself, another. Her. Casey dropped the revolver, dropped to her knees. The reflection stepped forward, pressed its hand to the glass, and whispered, Let me all the way in. Casey didn't remember kneeling. One moment she was staring at her reflection. The other, her standing inside the mirror with the Harper family arranged like porcelain dolls behind it. And the next, she was on the cold asphalt of Main Street, her knees wet with dew, her breath fogging in air that no longer felt like summer. The streets were silent, empty, not even birds. She looked round slowly. Every shop, window reflected her, but not all the reflections matched in one. Her eyes were closed in another. She was grinning ear to ear. In a third, Her body swayed back and forth. Like a metronome, she stood up. Every reflection froze at once. Then they all smiled. The mirror, leaning against the lamppost, cracked down the center top from within the fracture. A voice echoed outward, soft, feminine, impossibly layered. "You're wearing it well, Casey." She backed away, her head pounded. "You're not real," she said. "You keep saying that," the voice answered. "But it's funny, isn't it? How much of yourself you've already given me." Casey ran past the barber shop, past the old diner, past the church where her father used to sit in silence every Sunday, whispering to the stained glass. The streets didn't end, they looped. She turned left at the gas station, then again at the bank, found herself back in front of the lamppost, back in front of the cracked mirror. The reflection no longer smiled, it wept, and when Casey blinked, just once, the mirror was gone. Now there was a door where the lamppost had stood, a single wooden door, freestanding in the street, nailed into nothing. A black iron handle, no frame, no hinges, just a door. Her name was carved into it, not once, but dozens of times. Some fresh, some ancient. One near the top read, "CN, accepted." Shay turned to run and collided with someone. Hands caught her, warm, human. Travis, he looked older, thinner. His beard had grown in ragged dirt under his fingernails. Eyes sunken, she gasped. Stepping back. "Travis," he nodded slowly. "It pulled me in," he whispered. "But it doesn't always know what to do with us. Some of us. It, let's go." Tears welled in her eyes. "Where have you been?" "In the in-between," he said. "Rooms behind the mirrors, voices behind your voice." Then he looked toward the door. "She's trying to finish it. The last step, full replacement. How do we stop it?" He looked at her, solemn. "We don't." She shook her head. No. "There's got to be a way, Casey," he said, louder now. "You've already crossed over. Do you think it's a coincidence your name was on that wall? On this door? It didn't find you, it remembered you." She backed away, breath ragged. "You're saying I was part of this before. I'm saying you never left." He handed her a folded piece of paper, a photo, a black and white image of a child's birthday party. A girl, maybe 6, stood in the center, blowing out candles. Her, not older, not similar. Her, Casey Nolan. But the date stamp on the corner said 1989, 7 years before she was born. She staggered. Travis reached out to steady her. "You've been many things to it, Casey. A vessel, a memory, a witness. Now it wants you to be something else." She looked down at the door again. Something was leaking from beneath it. Not liquid light, but the wrong kind. Golden and pulsing, like veins beneath skin. It hurt to look at Dot. Travis gripped her shoulders. "We can stop it from taking another. Not everyone, but maybe. ... The next." "How sacrifice?" he said. "No, you don't understand." I said no. His hands trembled. "There's a room beneath the old church," he said finally. "It was built before the town, before the map. Your father knew about it. He called it the Anchor." She stared at him. "What's in it?" He didn't answer, but his face said enough. He handed her a key, iron, heavy, cold. "Don't use your name when you go in," he said. "It's listening." He turned and walked away. Didn't vanish. Didn't dissolve. Just left. She stood alone on the street, clutching the key. Then the door behind her creaked open. No handle, no pressure, just ... opening. She didn't look inside. She walked by dusk, She was standing in front of the church, its windows blackened by ash dot, its cross bent. Backward, she stepped through the front doors and into silence. Dust coated the pews. The altar was cracked, but in the back, behind the pulpit, was a TRAPDOR padlocked. She used the iron key. It turned without resistance. Stairs descended into darkness. She lit her last flare. The passage smelled of soil and iron and old breath. At the bottom, a stone room, circular dot etchings on the wall, not words, but symbols, one in the center, the circle and cross. She stepped inside, the flare dimmed, and from behind her, a voice spoke, her father's. "I'm sorry I kept it from you." She turned. He stood in the corner, unchanged. He looked sad, tired. "I tried to stop it," he said, "but it was too late." "You knew I wasn't yours," she said softly. "You were mine," he said, "from the moment you arrived on the porch, no older than a breath, no records, no history, just a girl in a thunderstorm, smiling up at me like she knew me." She fell to her knees. Tears came then, not from fear, from memory, flashes, the Harper kitchen, laughter, a face in the mirror, a lullaby sung by someone she couldn't place, but who sounded like her. Her father walked to her. Canel Neal held her. "You were supposed to be a vessel," he whispered, "but you became a person. You lived, you changed. That's why it's so angry." "What do I do?" she sobbed. "Don't give it your name." Then he was gone. A soft hiss filled the room. The stone glowed with heat, and from the center of the floor, a figure rose. Her, but not her, mirror dash bright, moving wrong, tilting its head at impossible angles. It stepped forward, and in her own voice, it said, "We were beautiful together, weren't we?" She stood, her flare flickered, then flared brighter, the light stinging the entity. It recoiled, she raised it like a sword. "This ends tonight," she said. The mimic snarled, "You can't destroy what you are." "I'm not you," she said. "Not anymore." And with a cry, she slammed the flare into the symbol at the center of the floor. Light erupted. Stone cracked. The mimic screamed. Every mirror in town shattered at once, and above them, in the sky, something blinked, then was gone. Darkness returned, silence. She lay on the floor for what felt like hours. When she opened her eyes, she was alone. Travis's voice came faintly through the receiver in her jacket. "Casey, are you?" She pressed the button. "I'm here." A pause. "Is it over?" She looked at the shattered stone dot, at the broken circle, at the absence of mirrors. Then she whispered, "I think so." But her voice echoed, not once, but twice. And behind her, in the reflection of the iron key, just for a moment, her face blinked, when she didn't. The next morning, the sun came up red, not orange, not gold. Red dot like something behind it had bled through. Casey stood on the hill above the church ruins, watching the light filter through smoke-thick pine needles. Her hands were dirty, her face burned in places. Her knees trembled with every step, but she didn't fall. She hadn't slept, couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw herself but wrong. Her reflection in the iron key blinking without her, her voice echoing. Twice. Her memories split and rearranged, as if someone had shuffled her life, like a deck of cards, and was now playing from both hands. The circle in the church basement was broken. That much was true. The flare had cracked the mimic's face, driven it back into the pit, but something in its eyes, Her eyes, before it vanished, told her this wasn't finished. Not yet. The signal was gone. The mirrors stopped fogging. But the town of Fairbridge didn't feel right. It felt hollow, like someone had drained its soul and left the shell behind. She walked the streets that morning and counted 7 homes with open doors and no people inside. Coffee still warm in mugs, showers running, radios humming on dead frequencies. At the center of town, in front of the sheriff's office, a single item had been left behind on the sidewalk, a mirror, cracked. But standing, she approached slowly and found something pinned to it with a hunting knife. A photograph of her and Sheriff Dwyer, standing in front of the Harper ruins, dated 1 year in the future. July 18th, 22/6. She pulled it down, flipped it over in block letters, written in red. She didn't stay gone. She called Travis. No answer. The line didn't even ring, just a long, hollow silence before disconnecting. She tried again. Nothing. By noon. The wind shifted. The trees bent toward her, not away. And in the distance, deep in the forest, she heard it. A sound like voices whispering backwards. She knew then where she had to go, not to the house, not to the bunker, but below. Far below, there had always been something beneath Ridgeway, something older than the Harper family, older than the mine collapses, older than the town. Whatever the entity was, it didn't come from that basement. It was just let out. And she was going to find the hole it came from. Finch had mentioned a collapsed lava tube system east of the ridge, forgotten even by the surveyors. That's where. She went. She packed light, flashlight, revolver, flare, mirror shard in her pocket. She hiked for hours through the trees, over deadfall, past landmarks that seemed to rearrange themselves the farther she walked. And then she found it. A sinkhole, maybe 30 feet wide, fenced off by rusted wire. A sign hanging upside down. U.S. Geological Survey, Note Entry 1974. She climbed under the wire, stood at the edge, and looked down. Blackness, but not empty. She felt it. Something watching from below, breathing. Not like an animal, more like a cave that remembered being open. She rappelled down the side, rock crumbling under her hands. When her boots hit the bottom, her ears rang dot, not from impact, from pressure, like the air down here had shape. The passage sloped forward, then split into 3, left, center, right. She chose left. It was instinct, not logic. The tunnel narrowed, then widened again. The rock walls turned smooth, like something had passed through them again and again until the edges polished into curves. She walked for what felt like an hour. Then she found the room, circular, always. Circular, no markings this time. Just a single object in the center. A cradle, wooden, ancient dot inside it. A baby dot. As she approached, slowly. The infant was asleep, peaceful, breathing, next to the cradle. A mirror leaned against the wall. She looked in. Her reflection held the baby, cradled. It whispered into its ear, then smiled. The baby's eyes opened. Black dot. The reflection looked up and said, "She was always mine." Casey stepped back. The baby vanished. The mirror shattered. The cradle collapsed into dust. A voice whispered from the walls, "Come home." She turned and ran, back through the tunnel. But the path had changed. Now, there was only one passage, and it led upward. She climbed faster, panicked at the top. Light spilled in. But when she pulled herself out of the hole, she wasn't in the forest. She was back in the Harper basement, except it wasn't burned. It was perfect. Amy sat at the table. Noah drew pictures on the wall. Elaine cooked something. On the stove, Scott read a book. They all looked up at once, smiled in unison. "Welcome back," they said. Casey backed against the wall. "You're not real." Amy tilted her head. "Neither are you." The mirror in the corner showed her, but not her. A new version. The same smile as the others. Same posture. Same black eyes. Casey screamed. The walls closed in. The light pulsed, and a voice echoed in every direction. "She's almost done." Then darkness. When she woke, she was outside the Harper ruins again. The hatch sealed. The sky black dot, no moon dot in her hands. A mirror, clean, untouched. She looked into it and saw nothing. No reflection, just void. She didn't exist. And the laughter began again, only this time it came from inside her own throat. She didn't remember walking home. One moment she was staring into a mirror that showed nothing, and the next she was sitting on the porch of her father's house, barefoot, knees scraped, hands folded in her lap. The wind had stopped. No birds, no distant traffic, just silence. Inside the house, everything looked exactly as it had before. The kitchen clock ticked. The fridge hummed. Her father's boots sat by the door like he might walk in any minute. But she knew better now. None of it was real. Not anymore. She rose slowly, walked to the mirror above the mantel. This time it showed her face. No flickers, no mimic, just her, tired, dirty, alone, but hers. She touched the glass, felt nothing, then turned and walked into her father's study. The old reel was still there. Power light dimly glowing. A new tape waited, unlabeled. She pressed play. Her voice came through, recorded. Calm, no static this time. No distortion, just her. "If you're hearing this, I've made it through. I don't know what's left of me or how long I have before it comes back, but I want the record to exist. For anyone who finds this. For the next girl it marks. It doesn't kill. That's not what it wants. It watches, it mirrors. And when you look into the glass long enough, it steps in. The basement was never about the house. It's always been under us, in the soil, in memory, in stories we tell ourselves to make sense of things we've forgotten. I think it was here before us. Maybe it is us. But I remember who I was now, and I think that matters." The tape ended. She sat in silence for a long time, then picked up a notebook, turned to a fresh page, wrote one sentence, "I am still me." Then she turned off the reel, walked outside, and left the door open behind her. She passed the mailbox, still dented, still leaning. The name Harper was almost gone now, the paint faded by years of weather, at the edge of the road. She found the sheriff's cruiser, just as she remembered it, covered in pine needles, dust coating the windshield. She opened the driver's door. Inside, a manila folder, one page inside, a single name, Casey Nolan, and below it, a hand-drawn version of the circle and cross. She burned it, watched the flame eat her name, watched it curl the symbol, watched the ash scatter into the wind. Then she drove out of town, past the ridge, into the hills. For hours she didn't speak, didn't cry, didn't think, just drove. She passed through a dozen towns, none of which had names she remembered. She saw faces that almost looked familiar, storefronts that felt like déjà vu, children who smiled a little too widely. She didn't stop, not until she reached the ocean. She parked at the edge of a cliff, where the sea crashed against stone and salt air clawed through her hair. She opened the trunk. Inside, a mirror, unbroken. She held it to her face, looked into her eyes, and said, softly, "Try me again, and I'll bury you in the deep." The mirror didn't reply, didn't shimmer, didn't blink, but just before she turned it face down and buried it in the sand, something shifted. For a fraction of a second, barely perceptible, it smiled. She left it there, drove until the tank hit empty. Dot slept in the back seat, cradling a revolver and a half-burned journal. And when she woke up, the world kept turning. The trees whispered, the mirrors stayed quiet, the signal never returned, but she knew it hadn't left. Not really, because one night, years later, in a different town, in a different house, with a different name on the mailbox, a child knocked on her door. A little girl, maybe 6. She held out a tape recorder, smiled wide, and said, "My name is Casey." The recorder played a sound, a voice. Dot laughing, 2 of them, and somewhere, in the shadows of the street behind her, a shape waited. Dot, watching. Dot still smiling, still remembering. And the door creaked slowly open. Silent pages.